much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling, won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joseph DeMare, and you have been one of the lucky ones who has tuned into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the happiness and health of your friends and family and pets and garden plants and pretty much everything that's alive all around you, because we're all in this together, folks. A lot of people want to deny that. A lot of people want to say, what does that have to do with me? What are redwoods in California? How does that affect me? Well, trust me, it does, because looked at it from a universal perspective, like in terms of the galaxy, if you just look at planet Earth, it's just this tiny little dot. It's just this one little system. It's hard to actually separate anything out of it. And lots of people try, though, and fail, because we are all connected. And I think the best thing to do is just enjoy that connection. And it's really a beautiful thing if you look at it. Now, I have to start out this show, our April 11th show, with an apology about last week's show, our Easter Sunday show on 106.5 FM. There was some technical difficulties, and the show actually was unable to air last week. So this is a good time to remind people that we have a podcast version and a YouTube version. Then the YouTube version particularly has some nice graphs and images in it. And it's a good show. If you missed last week's show and you want to catch up, you want to make sure you've listened to them all. You can either search for a Green Future on the podcasts at Podomatic, or go to YouTube and search for a Green Future. And we had a very nice interview with Timothy Mousseau, who happens to be probably the world's foremost authority on the effects of radiation on ecosystems. So if you want, go back and listen. Just a few things I wanted to talk about before we get going on the show. And it's a kind of an exceptional show this week, because we have not one but two interviews. We're going to be interviewing a gentleman called Joseph White Eyes, who is a Native American who was involved with the protests 5 years ago on the Standing Rock Reservation, because this month, April, is the 5th anniversary of the start of that occupation that went from April through about February. And so I have an interview with him, and I have a second interview with a woman named Maya, who also lives there on the reservation. And she came at the whole event from a unique perspective, because she was only 14 when it started 5 years ago. She's 19 now. And so I wanted to mark that anniversary by interviewing a couple people who were there, who were part of that whole movement, because that was really a dramatic thing, and we need to remember it. Some other things, so that'll be our interviews, and then Rebecca Wood will shortly be joining us, my wonderful co-host. And we'll hear from our advertisers after the interviews, and then ecological news, And hopefully at some point during this hour, we will hear from you at 866-240-1065. This is a call-in show, and we'd love to hear from our listeners. And you can also text during the show at any time at 419-973-5841, and we'll read your text on the air, assuming it's appropriate. This is how we'll spend the next hour, talking about ecology and the environment. Some really intense news stories coming up after the interviews and after the advertising. I just love being able to do this every week because, you take all this information in. If you're an ecologist like myself or an environmentalist, you're constantly bringing all this data in. Just really helps to be able to talk to somebody about it. It really helps to be able to share this information with people, because that sharing, is what's going to lead us all to eventual action. We're starting to act on it. People are starting to do things like put solar panels on their house and switch to electric vehicles. But it's not happening fast enough. So we need to talk to our friends and neighbors more about this kind of thing. And it's time to be brave, people. We've reached that point where we just can't allow ourselves to be bullied or shouted down. It's no longer time to just sort of sit back and quietly note what's going on. We've all got to jump in now and get active. And the regular listeners to the show know that one way I'm trying to do that is by fighting a new ordinance they put in place here in Bowling Green that fines the solar panels. Anyone who puts solar panels on gets a monthly fine, $4 per installed kilowatt. And I was going to speak to them 2 weeks ago, but they canceled their scheduled meeting for lack of business. So I've contacted members of the board this time and told them, don't cancel this week. You've definitely got business, because I'll be speaking, and then there's other people who are coming in. We're making a coalition of people that have solar panels or want solar panels in Bowling Green, and we're raising a fuss about this because it's these little local ordinances, these state and local ordinances, that really are having some of the most impact, environmentally speaking, both good and bad. I mean, some local ordinances have things like banning single-use plastic, which is great. But then others, we have, this is not the first time that a local community in Bowling Green has essentially decided to penalize solar power, unfortunately. But the rates here are exceptionally high and are sufficient to prevent anybody who needs to make their money back on their investment from investing in solar. There's always going to be a few people who have the money. And people have been putting solar panels on their roofs since the 1970s, when it was in no way ever going to be economical. Now that it has finally reached the point where the panels are inexpensive enough, you can actually make a profit putting solar panels on your roof. Now the local ordinances are trying to step in and prevent that. So tomorrow is when I will again be addressing the BG Utilities Board and asking them to reverse this insane policy. Just another quick little local bit of news. There's a huge solar farm planned for Weston over here in Wood County, which is a little rural community off Sandridge Road in Weston. And I've seen the map of it, and it's literally just going to cover stuff that's already farmer's field. So it's not like some of these solar installations that are being put into pretty much pristine forest and things like that. No, right now it's farmer's field. It's not going to cut down any trees. And in fact, it will improve the environment around Weston, because there'll be that much less pesticide spraying, that much less herbicides being put in the air, and the ground underneath the panels will be allowed to grow plants. And so that's food and shelter for butterflies and birds and small mammals and things. And so it'll make Weston a little more wild, a little more, give it a little healthier ecosystem, as well as supplying an incredible amount of power. In fact, this solar power system is going to be about an eighth the size of Davis-Besse nuclear power plant. It's going to be 101 megawatts of solar power, which is just incredible. If even just a few years ago, you couldn't imagine getting that much power out of a solar field, but the panels have increased in efficiency, the prices have come down so much that this is a great thing. But there's a political movement in Weston now to oppose it. And it's just a sad day that the Republicans, because it's the Republicans behind it, have decided to oppose clean energy as one of their main political planks. The Republicans in Weston are getting together and saying, we don't want solar, even though it's not going to hurt them. And in fact, it's going to generate 10 times the tax revenue for the schools in Weston and for the municipality in Weston. It's going to generate 10 times the tax revenue as the field that it is now. And essentially, it's the same thing. Instead of harvesting plants, they're going to be harvesting solar energy. And essentially, that's what plants in a field do, harvest solar power. And so, the opposition to it is illogical until you look at it in terms of politics. And politically, the Republicans have thrown in with the oil and gas industry and the nuclear industry. And so anything that threatens them threatens their supply of donations. And so now they've decided to make it a policy. And I see this not just in Weston, I see this nationwide, that the small local Republican organizations have been told, stop those wind turbines and stop that solar power. And it's literally insane, because without those things, we're not going to make it, folks. And there's a couple news stories in the second half of the hour that demonstrate this really clearly. So, Rebecca, hi. You were with us?
I'm here.
Welcome aboard.
I'm trying not to wake up the puppy this time.
Oh, all right. Okay, folks. So if you call in, use your indoor voice. We don't want to wake Rebecca's co-host Koga. He will, add to the show. He'll bark his opinion, but I'm afraid that barking. Yeah, that barking kind of hurts Russell there in the control room. It kind of makes those needles peg a little bit. So, all right. So, how are you doing, Rebecca?
Oh, not too bad. How about you? I'm having a little issue with allergies, which relates to my short segment next week on pollen.
Oh, I've been thinking about pollen.
A lot of us have, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the elephant in the room, the large, giant, microscopic, yellow, sticky elephant.
All right, great. We'll look forward to that next week. But this week we have 2 interviews, so we're going to get started on those. But before we go to the first one, which is the Joseph White Eyes interview, I just wanted to ask, what memories do you have, Rebecca, of Standing Rock encampment of 5 years ago?
I just mostly knew what I heard on the news. I think I might have had a couple of Facebook friends who went, and it just looked horrific. It's like, why are you doing this to people? I understand that the damage to the water there is very, very, very bad, and people need water.
Yeah, I would say people need water more than they need oil. I'm willing to come out and say that. So.
It was cold. They were shooting people with fire hoses, just all very bad things.
It was. But the camps themselves, the experience in the camps themselves was really incredible and beautiful and intense. And I tried to capture some of that in these interviews. So, Russell, if we could go to the first interview, please. If you could just share with our audience your name and who you're with.
Yeah, my name is Joseph Whiteeyes, 25-year-old grassroots organizer. Currently working with the Cheyenne River Grassroots Collective on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation.
Okay. And we're talking about the Standing Rock encampment, because this is the 5th anniversary of what happened there. And I understand you were among the first people to actually camp out there. First of all, what drove you to take direct action at that point? What led to the decision to set up camp as part of this action?
Yeah, so myself, I got, I guess you could say, activated back in 2010 when our tribe was going through some issues with our buffalo program on our reservation. And after that, I've just been, involved. I started meeting folks here and there. And then in 2012, I started getting into the fight with the Keystone XL pipeline. And from that moment on, it just started escalating, and I started, expanding my circle and my connections with other Indigenous leaders from different territories, and really getting to know one another and really relating to each other's struggles. And then I think it was back in 2014 or 15, during the whole Keystone Pipeline fight, I started hearing about the Dakota Access Pipeline and where it was going to be going. And I've always wondered myself during that fight, well, why aren't we stopping this pipeline, or why aren't we worried about this one at the moment? So, yeah, we ended up defeating Keystone XL Pipeline back in 2015 for the first time under Obama's administration. And then in 2016, a group of elders and some grassroots organizers from Standing Rock put a call out asking for a meeting for help on how they should go about stopping this pipeline from crossing the Missouri River just above the Standing Rock Reservation. And when they put that call out, they contacted Joy Braun, and then Joy Braun messaged myself and said, hey, do you want to go up to this meeting going on in Standing Rock? It's against the pipeline that's going to be built there. And myself at the time, I was part of a larger youth council on my reservation called the One Mind Youth Movement. And we were very active on our reservation. So I ended up contacting a lot of them, and we ended up getting in a vehicle, about 8 or 9 of us, including Joy. And we followed each other up to Standing Rock in early February, and we had those beginning meetings and beginning talks of what we should do and how we should go about, stopping the Dakota Access Pipeline. And in that night, we all went around, talking about, what it is, really updating ourselves and really getting, as much information to ourselves as we could about what we're dealing with. And, a lot of the youth went around in that meeting with the Elders Council, or whatever you want to call them, from Standing Rock. And LaDonna, Brave Bull Allard, she was in back of the room, and there was mention of a camp, because we previously had one on Cheyenne River against Keystone. And when that was mentioned, LaDonna stood up in back of the room and said, well, I have land. You can have that camp on my land. And then, so yeah, that started in February of 2016, and then ended up, in the works and in the plans. And we had previous meetings before the opening of the Sacred Stone Camp in April 1st, 2016. So that was mainly the beginning of it from my side, or from what I can recall in the beginning. So.
And did you folks have any inkling about just how big this would get? I think at the peak it was over 10,000 people there, wasn't it?
During like I said, we were involved at the camp on Cheyenne River against Keystone XL Pipeline, and we've seen a resistance camp on the Rosebud Reservation, and we've seen the numbers that it brought in to really fight against Keystone XL. So when this camp was offered, we set up camp April 1st. Myself, I wasn't there for the first couple of days. I ended up coming on the 3rd. But sitting around those fires and having those talks, late at night, early in the mornings, we really, had this sense, like, can you imagine this whole valley being filled with nothing but Indigenous people, going back to the old ways, living the way we used to, and really so we had sort of an imagination about it in the beginning before it really, took off to where it was, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. Now, there were a lot of dramatic events that happened during this encampment that went all the way, as you say, from April to the following February. Could you share with us just the story of one or two things that you might remember happening at that time?
Yeah, I guess, back in 2016, in the beginning days, there was only about 13 of us living in camp. I think the biggest it got during the summertime of 2016, there was no more than 30 people there at a time, and most of them were in the campers there. I think for me, remembering, back to the camp is the beginning days when it felt like a family. There was a small number of us, but we were there for a reason, and we were there because we had to be there at that time. And this was before everybody started showing up, or before, things started really getting out there in the media, drawing people's attention to what was going on Standing Rock. And we just, as that family unit that we formed and bonded, with our allies and everything, it just became a really strong sense of, a small community up there where we took care of one another. We fed each other. We made sure everyone had what they needed, from blankets to places to sleep. That meant like tents, teepees. And then, we started meeting relatives from the Line 5 and Line 3 fight over in Minnesota. And they started, bringing in people to help, support on the ground. And we ended up running to Washington, D.C. I started off with a run to Mobridge, just across the bridge from Standing Rock, and then it grew bigger to Omaha, Nebraska. And then we ended up running to Washington, D.C. To hand deliver, petitions to the Army Corps of Engineers trying to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. And then after, the run to Washington, D.C., kicked off and was finished, we started watching live streams while we were out there, people doing actions, going up to the front line. And you just see these police officers, like 20 units every morning, would just come over this hill, and they would just park there and prevent access from us praying, really, putting a line between us and that pipeline. And so in the beginning, you started seeing that already, corporate interests, and how much, the state, not just the state of North Dakota, but the state as a whole of the United States, really protects, companies over the people, and companies over, lives that want to live just to live. And it was alarming. And as far as like action wise, I guess, every part of it, was needed, and every part of it was used in a beautiful way. Because you had, like we said earlier, about 10,000 people, and it became the unofficial 11th largest city in the state of North Dakota. And, you had all these different tribes. You had well over 500 different tribal nations, just from the United States to, New Zealand to Australia, to even the Palestinian flag was flying at one time, and it flew throughout camp as well. And then next to it, about 5 flags down, you had the Israeli flag flying. And it showed that sense of unity, and that sense of like, everything that was brought to the table was totally different, because it was based off of people, and their resistance, and how they, resisted, what they didn't want going through their lands, from destruction to war to tyranny and all of that. And every action that took place, had a meaning and had some kind of symbolism behind it. And it was just powerful.
What does Mini-Wankoni mean, and what is its history? Yeah,
so Mini-Wichoni, it's a Lakota word. The word Mini means water, and Wichoni means life. So when you say Mini-Wichoni, people translate it as water is life. But to the old ones that speak the language, it means water of life. And so that's what it means, is water is life, or water of life. And the significance behind that, how that message came out, was the Lakota people, Standing Rock, the Cheyenne River Reservation where I'm from, just underneath Standing Rock, were 5 bands of the Lakota people in the state of South Dakota and 1868, 1851 treaty territory. And we have 7 sacred ceremonies that really mean a lot to us, and every one of those ceremonies involve water, from the sweat lodge to the sun dance, and just like I said, every ceremony had water involved with it. And our mothers, when they carried us in their womb, we were in that water being protected And it just leads back to a lot of, different types of connections with water, and people, being 70% made up of water and just everything. So it related a lot, not just to us, but that's why that messaging got so big, because people realize, water is big, and water is a part of, our sustainment as human beings.
The encampment went through a very harsh winter on the plains there. You guys really faced some incredible privations. How did you survive? How did so many people get through that harsh winter?
Yeah, so during the winter time, North Dakota, South Dakota gets some pretty harsh winters all the time. And, a lot of our people that live in the area are used to it. And so on our reservations, we have communities that are way out there. And a lot of times they face, these issues of roads being blocked off, of water pipes freezing, and all of this stuff. And it just, took us back to that genetic memory of having, survived it for so long, even, on these reservations, which are basically third world countries, and having to deal with this every single winter. So during the winter time up in camp, how we survived is just going off of that memory of how, we would live at home. And while there, we have medics, we have, warm places to sleep. We had firewood being brought in, wood stoves, teepees were insulated. They had army tents, army cots. Everything was insulated during that time. Everyone was dressed for the weather, and the weather really didn't put a big, pushback on us. It made things a little tougher, but it wasn't, too big to where we had to stop and go home. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, during that time, when the world was paying attention to the encampment, millions, tens of millions of people around the world stood with you, and everywhere you could see bumper stickers and signs saying, "I stand with Standing Rock." Did you folks in the encampment know what kind of support you were getting outside?
Yes, I guess I'd say yes. Well, at Standing Rock, I don't know if you ever made it there, but we had a place called Facebook Hill, and it was literally a hill right next to Highway 1806, and it was higher than the rest of the camp, and everyone would go there. That's where they would, go check their Facebooks. That's why they called it Facebook Hill. But the media team, that was put together by all these, grassroots people and organizations, took that hill as, the comms place, like the not the basic or command base or whatever you want to call it, but it was the best place to get service there. So it was the best place to, put out videos and really see everything. And as far as, us seeing it or us being, knowledgeable of it, everything was spread around by word of mouth while in camp. So if somebody seen something, 10 other people heard about it, and then 10 more people heard about it, and then it added on like that. So everyone knew what was going on outside. And I think the biggest shocker was when somebody mentioned that President Obama was, in Vietnam, I think it was at the time, and somebody there in the crowd ended up asking him, well, what is he going to do about Standing Rock? And that's when we knew that our message is even getting across to those that don't even speak the language or all the way around the world. And so, yeah, the people knew, and the people, as much as everybody else was watching, our people would go back online and rewatch everything that happened too, just so it would help them, really, really ground themselves in the moment.
So the DAPL is flowing. The pipeline is being used right now. The fight is not over. What is happening now? Where's the fight at now?
After camp ended back in 2016, there was a lot of PTSD and trauma that happened to everyone that stayed at the camp for more than a month or for the long periods of time. And a lot of people during that time were just, had to go home and they had to heal. Of course, you had other people leave from camp and go to other fights to help really bring up the fight against these, foreign corporations or oil interests or, fracking coal or whatever you have, whatever is going on. But yeah, so you had people going through that and people also going off fighting. And it was just, I think it was just a big healing moment for people, especially, dealing with the the guy in the office at the time, Donald Trump, and just, having to listen to him and having to hear all the bull crap that was spewing out of his mouth, and, knowing that no matter what we did, he wasn't going to listen because he did what he wanted the entire time. But DAPL was in court those 4 years, and they're still in court to this day. And what we did back in February of this year is that we, our organization, the Cheyenne River Grassroots Collective, along with Indigenous Environmental Network and the Standing Rock Youth Council, wanted to start putting pressure on Joseph Biden, the president now, to stop DAPL, because he has, the ball is in his court. He has the power to shut it down right now, but he's not refusing to do so. He's just not answering or giving us anything back. So back in February of this year, we ended up having a run from the Cheyenne River Reservation border all the way back up to the Ocheti-Shakoe camp, where the camp happened, against DAPL. And it was negative 17-degree weather outside, but our young people wanted to send that message to Joe Biden saying, he had the power back in 2016 when we were fighting, and he has the ultimate power now to stop this pipeline. So we started putting that pressure back on him. And that run, took place. It took all day. We started early in the morning when the sun came up, and we got to camp right as the sun was going down in the evening. And after that, we're like, well, what's next? And so we just started having phone calls between each other, and we started figuring out what we wanted to do, and we decided to take the streets in Washington, D.C. So we had months of, talking about what we wanted to do while we were there. Yeah, so we ended up, getting to Washington, D.C., I think it was on the 29th of March of this year. We had a 300-foot black snake erected from an artist based out of Minnesota. And so she built a 300-foot black snake that we marched with down the streets to the Army Corps of Engineers. And from the Army Corps of Engineers, we had that march to the White House. And when we ended up getting to the White House, we seen some individuals put up a tripod in front of the White House, asking or telling President Joe Biden to, build back fossil free, to shut down DAPL, to shut down Line 3. And it just brought, the sense of unity again, amongst the Standing Rock people, Cheyenne River people, and the Ojibwe or the Anishinaabe from the Line 3 fight, to working together to tell Joe Biden that, we don't, or if he wants to be the climate president that he's claiming to be, then he needs to shut down DAPL. He needs to shut down Line 3 and listen to the Indigenous people and the First Nations of this land.
All right. Let's hope he listens. So that's about all we have time for. Do you have anything you want to add that we haven't mentioned yet?
I'd just say for those of you listening, just pick up the fight wherever you are and fight like crazy, because we want our future generations to live. And, we only have so many years on this planet, but our grandchildren, will have to survive or live through any kind of harsh things that we failed to do for them. So I think that's about it. That's all I have to say.
That was Joseph Whiteeyes, and it's a very moving testimony. And then I'd like to go right to the next interview, and we're using up more of the show than usual with interviews. But if you listen to that, I couldn't figure out where to cut. Everything he said seemed pretty important and impactful. And same with the next interview. This is a woman named Maya, who was only 14 when the encampment started on Standing Rock Reservation, and so her perspective is different. And there were over 10,000 people there, and everybody had their own unique experience as well as the collective experience. So really, to do that justice, I'd have to do 10,000 of these interviews, but unfortunately it's only an hour-long show. So Russell, if we could go to the second interview now. Could you just share with our audience your name and what your position is?
Amadak Yapi, Chante Washte Nape Chiuzapi, Maya Runnels Amachiapi, Iawasloha Amataha. Hello, everyone. I shake a hand with a good heart. My name is Maya Runnels. I'm 19 years old, and I am from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, representing the Standing Rock Youth Council.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. So, Maya, so you're 19, so we're interviewing today because it's the 5th anniversary of the start of the Standing Rock occupation. When you started getting involved with the Standing Rock occupation, or I'm not exactly sure what the correct term would be, the encampment, were you thinking about environmental issues? Were you thinking about social issues? Where in your mind were concerns about the environment when this whole thing started?
Well, when this whole thing started, I was only like 14 and 15, and I was pretty young. I guess I really didn't think that much of the environment and social issues. So when camp started, it really got me to think about how important the environment is and how important water is, and especially like with today's day, how important these social issues are and that they need to be addressed.
The encampment itself was really kind of a learning and growing experience for you.
Yeah, it was really an eye-opener for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people don't really know. I mean, they heard of the Standing Rock protests. Most everyone in the world did at that time. But I don't think a lot of people really understood the scope of what went on there. Could you give us a little idea of like just how many people were there and how big were these encampments?
Well, I remember when my mom told me that people were setting up camp at Ochati-Shakoi, and I didn't really get the opportunity to see it right away when it just started out small, but it just really grew. Like overnight, it seemed like it was like its own little town almost. It was very peaceful there, I want to say. There wasn't only Indigenous peoples, but there was also a lot of people of color and I want to say, I don't know, white people. I don't know how to say that like without sounding...
I think that's okay. You can say white people on this show.
Okay, there was a lot of people of colors and white people there, all standing with Standing Rock because they knew what the bigger picture was.
And could you give us some idea of the setting? I mean, what it's like there on the reservation? We're in Northwest Ohio, which has a lot of rural areas, but there's a lot of cities that it's a lot of farmland. But where you live is a little more pristine, a little more wild, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of prairie. Our whole reservation, I think it's like one of the biggest reservations Standing Rock is, and it's like about the size of Connecticut. There's
wow,
a lot of little towns spaced out, and there's a North Dakota side and a South Dakota side.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of, let's say, wildlife, what kind of things would you expect to see if you were driving through the reservation?
You really have to watch out for deer. We also have a lot of buffalo and horses. Of course, like raccoons and sometimes coyotes, bald eagles.
Wow. So just overnight in this really sort of pristine, almost wilderness area, thousands and thousands of people from all over the world came, and they were fighting against, why were they there? What were they trying to stop? What was going on?
I think everybody came to Standing Rock to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline because we knew about the environmental impacts that it could possibly do. It could cause a lot of damage, and considering it's on our reservation, it's going to be the Indigenous people to be the first affected and the worst affected.
Yeah.
The pipeline was originally supposed to go in Bismarck, North Dakota, but the community there decided that they didn't want it because it was too dangerous, so then they moved it onto our lands because I think that they don't value Indigenous lives.
So it was too dangerous for Bismarck, but they said, "Oh, go ahead, you could put it on the reservation." Yeah. So all these people came together, and starting about in April of 2016, and then the camps mushroomed, and there were quite a few direct confrontations, weren't there, between the people in the camps and the people who wanted to put the pipeline in?
Yeah, there was a lot. A lot of people there dealt with a lot of police brutality and racism, and even in like smaller towns, like I don't live on the reservation. I live right across the river. So I visited camp a lot. But when I was going to school, I had to face a lot of racism and a lot of, I don't know, backlash, I guess, for standing up what I believed in was right. So it really did cause a lot of tension.
That must have been hard at that age to be facing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially, being like a freshman in high school. High school is really hard already.
And I'm embarrassed to say that actually some of those police that were there were Ohio State troopers, because our governor at the time decided to send a whole bunch of Ohio State troopers out to help break up the protest. I have no idea what his reasoning was, but were you there for any of the direct confrontations when it was protesters on one side and oil workers or police on the other?
No, I wasn't. I did go to like where they were working, and we couldn't like pass like the fence thing, but we're all sitting there peacefully for the most part. Or we were all sitting there peacefully, not for the most part. We were all very peaceful, and it was really hurtful and shocking to watch so much violence go on, because I remember, I think it was in November, I was either in Washington, D.C. or New York delivering a letter to Hillary's office, and my people on Ocheti Shakoi were being harassed and sprayed with cold water in like the middle of winter. It was really hard to see.
Yeah, and winter there is an order of magnitude heavier than winter, I think, in Northwest Ohio. I mean, you guys frequently have below zero temperatures, right? And high winds.
Yeah, for sure we do. Like 50 is a nice day for us here. You see people walking around with sweaters and driving around with windows down.
Mm-hmm.
This year was actually kind of concerning, though, because we actually didn't have a whole lot of freezing cold winters. It was really, really cold in February, and the rest were like upper 40s, 30s. Yeah,
this was definitely a warmer than average winter in Northwest Ohio, too. So you had these confrontations that went on, and the encampment kept going right through a really harsh winter. And could you just sort of give people an idea what it was like to just go through the camp? I mean, what kinds of things did you see? What did people say? What was it like to live in this? I believe there were over 10,000 people in this village, essentially, that popped up out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. It was really beautiful. Every time my mom took all of us there, like my siblings, she would always remind us that we need to go in with good energy. Before we go into camp, we need to check our energy, because the camp is a place for peace and prayer. So when you go in, you're supposed to have a good mindset, a good heart. You could just smell like fire, and it was really comforting. You could smell fire and sage. There was a lot of tents, some like I don't know, how do you describe them, like huts kind of, that people built. It was a lot of the stuff there was like recycled coats and jackets for people that needed them. They had outhouses, like not like the plastic ones, but like you put grass in them and stuff like that. So
mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff there was environmental friendly, and that's what the camp strived to do, because we want to change the environment for the better.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody picked up after themselves while they were there. Everybody had a part to do.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the general mood was very uplifting, very positive.
Yeah, for sure. When you were there were no strangers there. Even if you never met them, everybody was so nice and so welcoming.
So the encampment started in April, and it just kept going, and it had the attention of the whole world. I mean, out here, people everywhere you would see signs, people saying, "I stand with Standing Rock," and it was really very inspiring what was going on there on the reservation. But then, got through the winter, and then they broke up the camp. Do you have any memories of that, of what happened at that time?
I think it was really heartbreaking when camp got broken up, because I remember seeing pictures and hearing stories about people getting arrested and having numbers written on them, and people being dragged out of ceremony, sweat lodge. And a lot of people today still have a lot of trauma from everything that happened at camp.
At the end there. Okay,
Yeah.
So they broke up camp, and they started the oil flowing, but the fight's not over, though, is it? I mean, you folks are continuing to organize against DAPL, and what sort of things are happening right now?
Well, last week, right before Easter, right before April 1st, we made our way to Washington, D.C. to pretty much make Biden hear us, and that he needs to stand with us. We did a lot of stuff there. We did a 2.8 mile run around the National Mall to the Army Corps, and we did a rally there, and then we marched to the White House. And there we had this huge 300-foot long snake, and we had 7 coop carriers, and I was one of those, and we beat the snake down. And the big black snake, represented the pipeline, because it's actually a story that our ancestors told us that was passed down. They said that a big black snake was coming to attack us, and that the only way we can stop it is with peace and prayer. That's what we did. That's what we have been doing this whole time, is just really trying to beat this big black snake with peace and prayer. Okay.
Well, and let's hope we succeed in doing that, because it's hurting the whole world. The oil that's going through that is damaging the whole planet, and not just the threat to your reservation in your area. So I think we all need to grab a stick and help take that snake down. All right.
Yes.
Well, is there anything you'd like to add?
I would just like to encourage people to research where their water comes from, whose land you're on, and call the White House and let them know that you want the Dakota Access Pipeline to be shut down and to stop Line 3 and to build back fossil free. I think President Biden really needs to stand by what he says when he is going to be a climate president.
So I think we're going to go ahead, and we've got to rush through the last few minutes of the show, but there's still time for one call to get in if you have a reaction to our interviews. And of course, you can always email Joe at joedemare4agreenfuture.org. That's DEMARE, and then the word FOR. So it's joedemare4agreenfuture.org. And let us know what you think about our interviews. There's still a lot going on with that. That fight is not over. And right, Koga?
Yeah, Koga's ready to fight him. He's going to fight and bite him.
All right. Well, so now we have to move on quickly, unfortunately. But fortunately, we get to talk about our advertisers and patrons. For Agreed Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead us on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protect natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's a bunch of ways to get a hold of them. One is you could just give them a call, 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can also go to their website, wcparks.org, and they have a nifty app, which is just go to any app store. It's free. You search for WC Parks. Yes, Koga. And they're doing a lot of stuff for Earth Day this year. They're doing a lot of things that you can do with your family in a distanced, ecologically responsible way. So definitely check out what they're up to. We're also brought to you by our patrons, and these are wonderful people who have realized that if they want good things to keep going, like this show, they have to support them at some level. And we just want to welcome our newest patron, Val, just signed up. And the way she did that was she went to patreon.com, searched for A Green Future, and our show popped up there, and she just picked one of the levels where you can support every month. A little bit comes out of her paycheck now, or out of her checking account, comes over to us, and it really helps us keep the show on the air. So thank you to Val and all our patrons for helping us bring For a Green Future to the people. So just two quick follow-ups on the interviews, two little bits of news that happened after I did the interviews. One is that unfortunately the Army Corps of Engineers has decided to keep DAPL flowing even though there's been a court decision that rescinded their EPA certificate, their EPA permits, because they did an inadequate job of looking at environmental impact. So the judge said, we rescinded the permit, but the Army Corps has decided, we'll just keep going even though we don't have a permit anymore. And this is a growing and alarming trend because the law says you have to have a permit. And so the Army Corps has decided to flaunt law and allow that pipeline to keep running. And also, unfortunately, very unfortunately, the woman that Joseph White-Eyes talked about who offered her land for those encampments 5 years ago, LaDonna, just passed away. Just passed away yesterday, in fact. So that's a sad note. But it's up to us to carry the fight on. It's up to everybody to get off the oil and the gas, and we need to start doing our part. We need to pick up the pace. Now, on to ecological news. We've only got a few minutes to do this, so I can't do any of these stories justice, but I wanted to mention that right now there's a slew of anti-protest laws in the Ohio State Legislature. And the reason I bring this up is because this is how people get to learn about environmental issues. When House Bill 6 came along, we organized protests all over the state of Ohio, and we stood out there with signs saying no on HB 6. We had little flyers. People drove by and saw our signs. They're like, what the heck is HB 6? And they started paying attention to it, and that's when we just, everybody in Ohio discovered what a horrible, horrible bill this was, and that's why about 80% of Ohioans opposed it when it passed. So the Ohio State Legislatures decided to make that illegal. It turns protesting into felonies. And the mother of all these bills is HB 784, which is a bill that not only turned protesting into a felony, it also allowed you to shoot protesters without any repercussions. So it was just open season on protesters. Oh, you had to feel threatened by the protest. That was the one condition. So if you felt threatened, you were allowed to just open fire on protesters.
Which is, some law enforcement are apparently extremely delicate, as we know, about in their feelings, and a great deal threatens them. You would not think so, since they're big tough guys with guns, but it's true.
Right. But that bill has spawned a whole bunch of other bills that have bits and pieces that outlaw everything from standing around on a sidewalk to drawing on a sidewalk now becomes a felony if these bills pass. So, and that's ironic because, of course, January 6th, we saw a lot of actual rioting. Methane is rising exponentially, which means we could really be in trouble. Fukushima, the Japanese government has decided to dump all the radioactive water into the ocean. And then we've got a story about bald eagle deaths, which I'm going to have to save for next week. It's a really intense story. But it's been an intense episode. Thank you all for listening. I wish we had more time, but I really wanted to get those interviews in their entirety. So this is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
Them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia.